continue with the, oh, sorry, so we are now recording. Okay, maybe we can go with Laurent.
Okay, so hi, I'm Laurent. So I'm from Quebec. I did all my undergraduate and graduate studies at the University of Montreal. Did my PhD with Frédéric. So I'm working in visual perception, mostly object recognition. And right now I'm in a second year of postdoc. I'm a postdoc fellow in the Department of Psychology at Yale, in the department and the lab of Nick Brown. So my history is not as long as races, but that's it.
That's impressive too. You know, you all, that's a good thing because we have different level of experience too. So it's going to be very helpful today. So maybe Maxime.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. My name is Maxime Montembeault. I also did most of my training at Université de Montréal. I started with my bachelor's degree in psychology. And I don't think I knew right from the beginning I wanted to do research. It kind of developed over time. And even, you know, after a few years, I was still debating clinical versus research. So it can take a long time, but I guess at the end of my bachelor's, I kind of decided to work a bit more in research with Simona, who was here, and with Isabelle Rouleau at UQAM. And so then I did my PhD in clinical neuropsychology. And now I'm in San Francisco at University of California in San Francisco doing postdoc at the Memory and Aging Center since 3 years. And kind of in the process of applying for a faculty position now. So I'm kind of dedicated to academia now. Even though living in California, you get lots of you know, ideas about moving to the tech industry or things like that. I stuck with academia. So thank you.
Good for you.
Thanks, Maxime. Maybe Jean-Maxime, you want to go? No, I think you can.
It's fine. You are hearing me right well. Yes. Laurent, are you hearing me? Yes. All right. So, hi everyone. I'm happy to meet you today. My name is Jean-Maxime. I started my master studies supervised by Frédéric Gosselin here. I studied memory encoding in the visual ventral stream mostly, and also I'm now doing my PhD within using deep learning and trying to understand and create the stimuli that will be encoded differently by different part of the brain. But like when I was doing my master, I started EPUC, which is like a startup in cognitive and neuroscience and artificial intelligence. It's EPUC for the hippocampus in the brain, and we are specialized to model memory encoding. And right now we created the first software that is ready to be commercialized. We have actual funding to do this, and the idea is that we are helping small, medium, and large business to optimize any design in seconds and in advance by predicting how their target audience will process their key messages they want to communicate with them. So this is mostly about me.
Thank you very much. Merci. Simona, do you want to go?
Yeah. So my name is Simona Brambati. I am a professor here, and I started my studies in Italy, as you can see my accent. And I did my undergraduate studies there, and then I did my PhD in cognitive neuroscience. I had also clinical training, so I was also a clinical neuropsychologist. I decided to continue in research, so I did a first postdoc at UCSF in San Francisco. And then I moved to Montreal to do a second postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Montreal. And then I started the chercheur boursier for QS carrière. I don't know how to translate chercheur boursier. Research salary.
Salary award.
Soft money.
And then I had a professor position here at the University of Montreal in the psychology department.
My name is Frédéric Gosselin. I'm a full professor here at the University of Montreal. So I've been a professor since 2001. I was born in Quebec, in Hull. Now it's called Gatineau, but traditions are important, so I still say Hull, in the Outaouais region. And my family traveled quite a bit. So I've lived in Toronto, I've lived in Quebec City, I've lived in Kenya-Pisco in Quebec. So that's the northern part of Quebec. I've lived in France with my family. And eventually I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Ottawa. And then I moved to Montreal. I did a master's degree here, and I did my PhD in Glasgow. So during my studies, I had the chance to travel to the UK and Glasgow in Scotland. But also I lived for 2 years in Indiana. So I lived in South Bend, Indiana for 2 years, which is very different from Montreal and very, very different from Glasgow. So I think that's something that that's turned out to be really important for the fabrication of who I am today. I had the chance and the misfortune, because it's both, to have a job right after my PhD. So I guess the committee at the University of Montreal was impressed enough by the work I had done during my PhD to give me a position right after my PhD. But it also means that I didn't have the chance to do a postdoc and to travel some more and to experience different research environment. But then again, I had a permanent position relatively early on, so that's good. I guess we'll get a chance to discuss this a little bit more later. I never thought I would remain at the University of Montreal for all these years, but here I am on the verge of turning 50, still at the University of Montreal, and still doing more or less the same type of research. I am interested in object recognition mostly, like Laurent, and I have interest in memory, as Jean-Maxime mentioned earlier, and mainly I work on the visual system object recognition.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you actually for being here, for taking the time to share your experience. I'm sure that all the students and the future researcher will greatly appreciate it. So before we start a discussion, I think that Frédéric will present some examples of job possibilities after completing a PhD in the field of neuroscience. I think it's gonna set the table pretty well. So can you share the first slide?
You don't have to share the notes. These are actually slides that I've used in the past for presentations. Okay. Well, I just want to add one more thing before explaining to you what's on the.
Can you see
monitor.
them?
No,
I think you need to share screen.
Yeah. So you just select the PowerPoint.
So as Anne mentioned earlier, I had a second hat, so I have like a second job, if you want. I have a scientific consulting company, and I invited Grace today because I worked with Grace in the past at Netflix. I wanted to mention it because I know the industry a little bit from an outsider point of view. And you will know that you will see that some of my students are involved. Former students are involved in this company, this consulting company. Okay, so lots of you are students in the neuropsychology RE program. So can you raise your hands? Right. So in theory, you have a research aspect to your work and an intervention aspect to your work. But in fact, most of you will become neuropsychologists. Very few will become researchers. I've asked colleagues to estimate how many of you will become researchers, like Anne has become a researcher mainly. Maxime, who talked earlier, seems to be interested in research mainly. But it seems that it's less than 10% of you that will become researchers, and closer to 8 than 10%. So just to illustrate this, I've supervised in the past, because I don't do it anymore, but I've supervised in the past students like yourself. I've supervised 6 of them, and they've all turned neuropsychologists. Actually, there's one, I've kind of cheated here, because Sylvain Rowe is head of the Association of Neuropsychologists in Ontario. So he's doing mostly managing work in neuropsychology. He's not really a practicing neuropsychologist. Okay, so that's for you, and for the others that are in research. Raise your hands in the audience. Very few. So for the 3 of you. Not quite, it's a bit more than that. Well, the future is a bit less certain for you, I'm afraid to say. So I've supervised 21 students that are more or less finished, or Jean-Maxime is not finished yet, but he already has a plan for his future, and he will talk about it later. So I've included it in the list. So let's start with Céline Binette, my very first student when I arrived at the University of Montreal. So Céline did a master's degree with me, and she's now a psychiatrist. So she decided not to continue in research. She went to medical school, and she's now a psychiatrist. Nicolas Dupuy-Roy, my second student, so they're in chronological order, is involved in the company I mentioned earlier. So he's officially his vice president, but in actual fact, he's doing all the job, and I'm just cashing in, essentially. It's not quite true, but more or less. Jude, my third student, did a master with me, and now he works for Apple in Montreal. So he does, I don't know how to say that in English, but he teaches to people that help you if you have trouble with your Apple products. So the helpline, so he teaches to these people, and he seems to be happy doing it. Benoît Bacon did a postdoc with me, and he's now president of Carleton University. So president means rector. Daniel Fizet did a postdoc, and I put him in the same bag as Caroline Blais because it's a couple, and they both have jobs at University of Quebec in Outaouais. And actually, Caroline recently got a research share of Canada, so she's, I'm very proud of her. I'm proud of all my students, by the way. Alain Chauvin did a postdoc with me. He's now maître de conférences in Grenoble, so it's a little bit like assistant professor in English or professeur adjoint here, except that they teach a lot more than here. Zakia Ahmad did a postdoc, and she's now a researcher at Carnegie Mellon. So she's been for more than 10 years now. Frédéric Poirier did a postdoc also. He's now a scientific consultant. So I'm not sure where he is now. I've lost, it's one of the few I've lost contact with, but he was a scientific consultant. Colin Fournier-Boudria did a master with me, and he warned me when he started that he wasn't interested in research, and he was just doing a master's degree because he had obtained funding, so a scholarship to do a master's degree. So he's now a stand-up comic, an author in Urbania. He's also a director. He's a radio host. Vincent Tachereau-Dumouchel did a master with me, and then he did psychologie RI, like most of you. And then he really disliked it when he discovered what it meant on a day-to-day basis, and he decided to return to academia. And he did a postdoc at UCLA, and now he's a professor in psychiatry at Université de Montréal. Alexandre Couette-Garand did a master with me, didn't want to continue in research, and he switched to a deep sea in psychology, and he works now in a private clinic called Lumino Health. Bernard Willem-Buckle did a PhD with me, and she's, well, to be honest, I don't know where she is at the moment, but last I heard of her, she was a postdoc at the Goethe University in Frankfurt. Lucia Zhang did a postdoc in my lab, and she's a professor at Hangzhou Normal University. Solène Fourdet did a master in my lab, and then she did a deep sea in Anne's lab.
Actually, she switched to RI, so she's finishing. She's
okay, so she switched, and she also works. I don't know if she still works, but she worked for a while, at least in a private clinic. Xavier Morin-Duchesne did a master with me. Then he did another master. It was supposed to be a PhD, but he didn't like it at University of Indiana, Bloomington. And then he did a third master degree in computer science at McGill. And he called me yesterday to tell me that he had a job offer, a firm job offer. So at Quantitative, so he works in it's actually a big startup with more than 200 employees. And it will soon become a public company, and he has shares in the company, and he was offered a pretty good deal. Jessica Tardif did her master degree PhD with me. She just finished last year, and now she's a data analyst for Santé Canada, Health Canada. Simon Faguet-Soubeyran did his master, and he's currently doing his PhD with me, but he's almost finished. And he's had an offer to continue for a postdoc at Oxford. Laurent Caplette is here, so ask him. Paul Lenné did his master in my lab, and in parallel, he did a master at HSC, and he's an analyst at Calson. Maxime, you've heard about. So he's doing his PhD. He's not officially finished his master degree, but he's essentially finished. And he's president of IPOC Cognitive Network. So this gives you an idea of the diversity of jobs that the three of you are likely to end up working. I just want to tell you before we continue that I think these people are just as happy and they make just as much money, if not more, than the people that did a clinical degree and turned out to be neuropsychologists. And I hope this will come across the discussions that we'll have in a few minutes. So I've already taken way too much time, so let's continue.
But thanks a lot. I think it set the table pretty well. So we're going to discuss different thematics related to how to build a research career in neuroscience. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, what do you do as a researcher on a day-to-day basis? So, and which kind of research methods do you use? So people can see what is the job you are doing exactly. So just close this. Oops. I cannot see you anymore. So, so I want to start. Somebody want to start with that? Grace, do you want to go? So we have a feel from the industry.
Let's do it. So my typical workday, I spend a couple hours per day in a lot of meetings. And I work very closely cross-functionally with people who are in different roles outside of research. So I work really closely with data scientists. I work closely with designers who are actually drawing exactly what Netflix looks like today. I work with engineers who are the ones who actually then create it. And then we have someone usually leading our team, and I meet with them all the time too. So at first, when I made the transition from academia into the tech industry, I felt really negatively about how much time I was spending in meetings, but that actually ends up being where I have the most impact and change the course of directions, share my research findings. So I would say probably half of every day tends to be in meetings. And the other half of the day, I'm working on a variety of different projects that are all at different stages. So I try and keep some that are close to wrapping up, some that are like very early starting out. And I will say that the tech industry tends to reward generalists a little bit more than specialists. So I have had to learn a lot of new research methods that were not what I was necessarily trained in undergraduate or graduate school. So I considered myself someone who was very good at running surveys, and that was basically it. And I've learned 40 other methodologies since then and in the industry also uses terminology to describe jobs and researchers as qualitative or quantitative, and you're one or the other. And it's a totally arbitrary distinction that doesn't actually exist, but they'll force you to label yourself one way or the other. So I'm labeled as a quantitative person just because I know how to do surveys and I run a lot of experiments. And not a lot of researchers do. So I get rewarded for that a lot, but I sometimes also will have to do interviews with people or run focus groups. And I've learned those skills along the way. So it's a wide range of research methodologies, and really just whatever is the best way to answer what question the team that I'm working on has. And so I'll either learn it myself if it makes sense, or I will partner with someone else who knows it better than I do and have them work on it for me. And so that's why I've gotten a chance to work with Fred before, because he knows much more than I do on a lot of implicit measurements and kinds of tasks that we've done together.
Thanks a lot. Your day-to-day seems very interesting, very diverse, and yeah, I'm kind of jealous. And so, Maxime, do you want to add anything about from an industry point of view?
Yes, I think it would be a good idea to follow Grace. Yes, for me, it's very diversified as well, because maybe on my PhD and fundamental research part right now, it's about 5 hours a week, and sometimes I don't have the time because having right now I have 7 employees, so it's a reality that you need to do a lot of stuff to get funding first, so that you talk to investors. I talk with a lot of VCs in Canada and the US, but also there is a lot of grants submission that you need to do for R&D, and this will pay actually your employee. For example, I have developers that 80% of their salaries are paid just with grants, but it's a lot of money that you can get from the government, but it's also a lot of commitment in terms of time, and it's very stressful in terms of job. And it's always there's also all the part where you are doing R&D, and right now we don't have a chief technology officer, so I'm doing all of this with my programmers and my AI engineers. We are working every week together, meeting, etc. And finally, I would say there is the part where I need to get revenue, so I talk with customers, but also we have partnerships with major brand and agencies like Desjardins, but also HHUA in the US. In UX, they are pretty known. So it's maybe it's very diversified, very stressful, but but when you have more responsibility, you have also more accomplishment of when you're successful. So it's maybe a simple turnaround.
Thanks. And anybody in the audience would have questions about the day-to-day job of a researcher in the industry, or anybody wants to know something that hasn't been mentioned? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, maybe I was curious,
you say you're in a lot of meetings, and so what do you do in those meetings? Is it mostly like presenting your results? I know like it would be different for you both because it's not exactly the same thing. Like how many of those meetings are for actual research, like presenting results or talking about next steps of some research project versus talking about, for example, marketing or finding money or yeah, those kind of stuff.
I would let Grace start.
I can take that one first and then I'll leave it to you. It widely varies. I would say I'm giving a presentation on research at least once a week. And it's usually an hour. But oftentimes I will do a study that I think has impact for a group of maybe 10 people. And then others will find out about it and they want to hear about it. And so I do a lot of repeat of sharing the exact same results over and over to different groups of the company, just because there's thousands of people and I don't know them all. And it takes a while for it to slowly trickle out. But most of the meetings I attend, it's making plans and, you know, what are the things that we want to test? What would be, some of it is planning what the research would be and then me helping share that eventually. But oftentimes it's me just sitting there to learn what they're thinking about, what questions they have, so that I can not only design studies that are very tactical in terms of like answering questions they already know they have. But sometimes I'm doing strategic projects, answering questions they don't even know they have yet, that I've just heard them kind of talking about. And then I'll go off on my own and come back and give them some directions of what might be next. So combo.
Do a follow-up, Grace.
Yeah.
You need to apply to grants to get your research money?
No. So that's really fun. And that's honestly one of the main reasons I switched. I hated applying for grants. It was so hard and very time consuming. And yeah, so that I don't, there's definitely wide variation between companies in how healthy their budgets are. I'm lucky that I work at a company now with a very small research team. So we each get a lot more money to spend. When I worked at Facebook before, it's a much bigger research team. So I had a much smaller budget. So there's a lot of variation there.
It's great because when I started the epoch, like one of my, not struggle, but like was about finding money every year to continue my master or PhD. But now I thought, oh, by creating my startup, we'll get funding from investor and it will be like, but it's not the case. I do like every 2 months, I need to do a grant demand to support our expenses. But to answer your question more precisely, like I have different kind of meeting, and when I'm with the customers, I don't necessarily talk about research, but or right now the R&D in our company is very linked to the software development team, because we are talking about all this research, the validation of our models, the creation of new models, or like pipeline of creating AI models mimicking the human brain, how they will be after or deployed on our software. So like on the same meeting, I have all the front-end, back-end developer, and also the R&D persons that are more researcher in AI and engineer. But we just, it's like a stand-up in this case. So we try to go so that everybody can be aware of what's next, but as well of like how it's going in terms of the R&D project that are necessary so to get the product done. So that's.
Maybe, sorry,
Yes.
yeah. So maybe you're doing more like coordinating than yourself. Like,
I do I don't necessarily code as much as when I started, because like right now I have more people, and even for the grant now we just hired a grant manager. So like he's doing the grant for me because I don't have the time anymore. But still I need to review all of this. It's more of a coordination. But like when you are having a lab at university, like your job is more of manager than actual researcher. But yes, it's a lot of managing.
Maybe we can switch to Oh,
I just had another question, maybe for Grace. I don't know, as Maxime's experience is different, but when you do research for the private industry, do you ever have findings or methodologies that you feel could be of interest for the public or for the scientific community? And if so, do you share them? I know, Maxime, you still have like a 5-hour-a-week foot in academia, but like in the private sector, do you share those findings or methodologies if they could be of interest for the scientific community?
It's a great question. The analogy that we use at our company is that the work that you do is a cupcake and the cake part, and then the frosting part is everything that you do for the research community within the company. So that includes me training other researchers or up-leveling the research methodologies that we use. And then only the cherry would be publishing. So it's not really rewarded. You can have a cupcake without publishing, without a cherry. And we're not really rewarded for it, and our time is very stretched. So I don't do it on too often. I have published one article since I've been in the industry, and it's been 5 years. So I'm not doing it a lot.
Thanks. So yeah, maybe we can switch to academia. Simona, do you want to, and if you have questions that you want to ask in French, there's no problem. We can translate them. Okay. Simona, do you want to go? So what's your day-to-day job?
It's not that different from what I've heard. I think there are some common things. I mean, I look for money all the time. That's part of my job. I am in meetings a lot. And I think that the last time that I did research full time, it was during my postdoc. So I do research, but I also manage a group. I supervise research. And what Grace said about methods and technology, it was interesting because when I started to do research, I was considering myself like an fMRI person because I was doing fMRI to address my research question. And then you have new research question and you have to develop new methods to try to solve your research question. So I don't feel like an fMRI person anymore. And I have to learn new methods, and my lab use more methods. So my day-to-day is very different depending on the period. But I think that all the things that have been mentioned by the other people is something that I do in my work life. The only thing that I do more maybe is the teaching because we have to teach. But I like that. I mean, that's why I'm here today too. So that's pretty much, yeah.
Thanks, Simona.
Can I compliment?
Yeah, sure.
Bit? Yeah. So I agree with Simona. Being a professor in the university is like having a small company. So it's a little bit like what Maxime described. I would say more than what Grace described. The difference, though, is that we have some stability in our revenue. Maxime has, well, now he's maybe secured a little money
For 3 months.
For 3 months. So he's basically living for the next 3 months and always trying to find new investors and new money. So we don't have to worry about that. When Simona mentioned that we're always seeking money. It's to do research, but our salary is not at stake here.
And we'll discuss about salaries also.
Yeah. Except maybe early on during the career where as long as you don't have a tenure, so a permanent position, there is a little more worry about getting funds because the tenure is dependent to some extent to getting funding, research funding. But after that, I would say that this is not something that worries me at all. I sleep very well at night, whereas I suspect that sometimes Maxime must be slightly worried. He has people working with him, depending on him, and the whole company is depending on his capability of finding money. And the other thing I wanted to add to what
Can I say just something?
Yeah, sure.
That it's, but it's true. Here at the University of Montreal, we should mention maybe that not in all the university, in all the country, the system is like that. So professorship is not always stability. I know that at UCSF, for example, many professors for a long time of their career they are on soft money. Just to mention that it's not always like that.
But it's the exception in Canada. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to add to what Simona said is that officially we have 4 jobs as a university professor. So the first one is doing research, novel research. So that's been mentioned. The other one is teaching. So that's definitely something that Jean-Maxime and Grace are not doing. But teaching means teaching at the undergraduate level, but also supervising students at the graduate level. So even though our title is professor, we actually do not teach much. It's maybe 1/5 of our job, if not less. And it's not rewarded that much. I mean, it's something we need to do. But when you get hired, you're not tested on your ability to teach. And if you taught before, it's a plus, but no more. What the committees are looking for is ability to do research, secure funding, to run a lab, basically. The other 2 jobs that we have are to do some managing or to help the operation at the institution. So that's something that we're officially paid to do. So we need to get involved at groups like Cerebrum. We need to be on committees for the university and so on. And the 4th job that we need to do is to do management like that, but outside the university. So get involved in colloquiums outside the university, organize conferences, give interviews on television, and so on. So these officially are the 4 things that we need to do. And to get a promotion at the University of Montreal, you need to achieve certain objectives on these 4 jobs. The postdocs.
But just before asking, maybe Maxime, you could talk about a bit about what is a postdoc, what does a postdoc do during a day, but just to say, grant application as a professor, a lot of people look at it and say, oh, I don't want to do research because I don't want to look for money all the time. But there are positive things about doing grant application. Actually, I like it very much because you have to read a lot of that. You have to read the literature. You have to update the knowledge and your knowledge about the topic you want to write about, and you have to think very specifically about what you want to do. What would be this project? Okay, well, I want to do that. These are the objectives. How will I do that? What are the methods I'm going to use? So it's fun at some point. There are dark side, but it's fun. So Maxime, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Well, I would start just by Grace by saying that it's a lot of meetings for sure, even as a postdoc. So I guess my profile is a bit different. I guess the difference in my profile is I'm also a bit of a clinical researcher, I would say. So I have still a lot of contact with patients. So I work with patients with dementia. So I still, it's kind of a very clinical researcher with a lot of neurologists, psychiatrists, geriatricians, social workers, and so on. So a lot of multidisciplinary meetings for research still, but there's a clinical component to it. So that's one thing that might be a bit different from everybody else on the panel today. Besides that, I mean, as a postdoc, the good part is that if you either have your funding right at the beginning or you get paid, so you don't have to apply too much for grants during these years. So it's actually nice to kind of have the time to really focus on the research during this period. So I really appreciate that right now. I'm kind of like calm. Then the storm begins again when you start applying for a faculty position. This is a bit stressful, but for a while you have a few years in which you can actually focus on the research. So a lot of writing, reading, a bit of teaching as well. So these are my days.
Thanks a lot. Laurent, do you have anything to add or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit similar to Maxime, but in my case, I don't have the clinical side, and but it's also a lot of meetings, maybe not as much as the other people on the panel for me, but still a lot more than in my PhD. Yeah, I think the constants are basically meetings, talks, and emails. And apart from that, I think it depends on the stage where I'm at in my projects. So from 1 month to another, it can vary quite a lot. If I'm planning a project, it's a lot of reading. Otherwise, it's running experiments, analyzing data, writing papers, including finishing stuff from my PhD. So I think that's a relatively common thing for postdocs. We still have to publish our papers from our PhD. So we're kind of doing these two things at the same time in the beginning. Yeah, I think that's it. Presenting data. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So Maxime said that he didn't have to apply for more grants during his postdoc because all the money was secured at the beginning. Is that your experience, Laurent?
Yeah, I also had I had external funding when I started my postdoc. So once I started, I didn't have to apply for grants or fellowships, but then to continue beyond the second year, I had, well, I don't necessarily have to apply because my supervisor is also paying me a salary, but yeah, I had to apply basically to get funding from third and possibly fourth year. So that took also a lot of time recently.
Thanks.
Maybe I can add a little something actually regarding funding. It's different for everyone, but it's just before going as a postdoc, I was really worried and really nervous about applying to grants, and I spent a lot of time preparing. And then I came here to the States, and I realized I was the only one who had my own, funding, external funding. So of course it's important to apply and to be really good to make sure to get like CIHR or like Quebec government grants, but there's also other opportunities. It doesn't end to like kind of Canadian funding. There's a lot of other opportunities and a lot of money in different labs, and they're really researching for a lot of great candidates. So don't get discouraged if you don't have the funding the first year. It's not as crazy as it looks like.
Yeah, I totally agree. But also, I think if you have external funding before you start your postdoc, it can be helpful to get in the lab that you want, for example. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to know, what do you think about, what do you think it takes to become a postdoc or a researcher in academia or in industry? So what are the assets you need? So in few words, could you?
I can start if no one. So I think to be a postdoc, it probably varies from one field to the other, but I think you have to have a few publications before you start, and so that will show that you can run a research project to the end, and your rigor and your aptitudes in research, and also, of course, skills, both theoretical but also data analysis skills. I think is really important, especially nowadays. And yeah, experience with the multiple methods is probably a plus, but it depends on the lab and on the PI, of course. And I'd say probably one essential aptitude to have an academic career is perseverance. Yeah.
Somebody else? You're totally right.
Maybe I can add just two little things. I think, Laurent, you did really well. For me, I think passion is a big one because, you know, it's not always easy. And, you know, I think you just have to be really passionate about it. The other one that we don't talk a lot is social skills. I think it's really helpful to be a great like team player, great collaborators. I get a lot of joy from collaborating with a lot of people, and I think it's helping me as well in my career. So I think it's you know, it's something that we don't hear a lot, but it's really nice when you work with nice people, basically.
Someone else? So in the industry, what does it take to become a researcher?
You want to go first this time?
You want me to go first? Yes. All right. I will. Then I think that in my case, I have this phrase in my head, this sentence in my head that is always like, you need to be very stubborn on the long-term vision that you have, but like to be very flexible on all the details of how you will achieve this long-term vision. And as I said, like perseverance, like you need to become a perseverance genius if you want to be there and continue, and maybe like a sort of a high risk tolerance, and that's it.
Those are good. I'll add a couple too. I think just the idea of being able to take an abstract concept and then specify and define it into a very clear set of questions that can be answered in a specific way. That is the core of what it takes to be a researcher in the tech industry. It's not that you have to have specific publications or very specific methodological skills. You have to have some of those. But if you have scientific thinking, that's really all that it takes. There's two little pieces that I think are quite different from academia. One is that you are often the only person in the room who is a researcher with a research training. And so being able to clearly communicate what you're talking about, and honestly, if you have any teaching experience, it goes a long way of teaching people who know nothing about research what we're doing and how to do it. That's really helpful. And then the other piece about it as well is that we have to make sure that we're evaluated by our research being impactful and changing other people's decision-making. So we can't do studies just because we think they're really great questions that we think are fun to answer. Someone has to be able to use it in an actionable way. So that's really important too, is thinking about how can I make sure that this will give them the answers they need to change their decisions, and fast enough where it's not going to be too late when they already have made the decisions too far down.
Yeah, I can add something on this. I totally agree with you with the communication skills that are needed in research thinking. But I don't know if you see the same at Netflix, but when you are working in startups, or we see it with the Neurology as well. When they created the Neurology, they started the researcher that started the project are all gone now, because it's not the same mentality when you work in the industry. You need to go faster and break things. But when you are working in academia, it's not the case. And I don't know if you see it at Netflix, but like the researcher wanted to start with 2 electrodes in the neural links just to make tests. And like the people said, oh no, like put 2,000 electrodes, and if it works, we'll have better signals so that we can continue. But it's not the same mentality, and they can be like sort of a clash when you come from academia to go in the industry. And you need to have this in mind as well.
Yes, we say, don't let perfect get in the way of done a lot.
Yes, exactly.
So Simona, Frédéric, do you want to add something about what does it take to become a researcher?
Maybe I could begin. Yeah. So I think there isn't a single type of academic university professor. I think there's room for a variety, which is not to say that a certain type is not preferred nowadays, but I think there's room for diversity, and you do see this diversity among colleagues. So some people are stronger in terms of analytic skills, computer skills. Others are stronger conceptually. And I think all of that is great. And some are, as Jean-Maxime mentioned earlier, some are more lab managers because they have big labs, and it's difficult for them to on a day-to-day basis to do research because they don't have the time. They have too many people to manage. So there are all these kinds of researchers, and it's fine. It's possible to do to be all of these researchers. But to add to the list of qualities that are important, I think, mostly to all of these type of university professors, abnegation, so the ability to suffer for with the hope that eventually you'll have time to do things you like. So Maxime was mentioning passion. So you can be passionate about certain things like your research topic, but often that's only part of what you do on the day-to-day basis. You do a lot of other things that you're less passionate about. So you need to be able to go through the motion and do all these things that you don't necessarily enjoy doing. And the other thing I think is very important in general for a job is being opportunistic. So a lot of the opportunities that I've had in my life, and I think it's true of most people, I didn't have much control over. There was a big element of chance in them. I think often what makes the difference between someone that succeeds and doesn't is this ability to grab these opportunities when they present themselves. So that's why I meant by opportunistic.
I think they have covered pretty much everything, but just to tell you something that was, I hope that someone told me when I was younger. So but that's something that has been told. When I finished my postdoc, I was very productive. I had a very good list of publication, and I thought that I was a hero and I was able to do an easy career as a professor. And it was wrong because I was not pushing the other quality that I didn't have at the time, because I was focused on something that I was able to do. And I was trying to do at the best of my capacities. But when we were looking at, I don't know, networking and things like that, I was zero. And I think we cannot change our profile. And in academia, we have place for different profiles. But if you are excellent in one thing and zero in the other, it's not going to work. You have to keep pushing a little bit, also things that you are not able to do, or it's not your favorite things, like Frédéric was saying. So just think every year that you want to improve your publication list or what you do best, but you have to have objectives also for things that you are not able to do or it's not your nature. So I remember that I was going to conferences and my objective was like to ask a question in front of the people, because that was my thing that I was not able to do. And I was like, okay, this time I have to ask one question. Then the other conference, it was 3 questions. So don't stop improving also in the things that are more difficult, because they are important to do. And don't settle down, just work hard all the time.
That's a really good point.
This is true.
And about what Frédéric said about you're not doing what you like most of the time, but I'm an optimistic person. So it depends, because being in academia, it's very flexible. You can manage your schedule almost as you want. You have a lot of flexibility, with a very, very positive part of the job of having an position in academia. And you can manage to choose. So of course, you have to do a lot of different things, and you have to do some committees to teach to, but you can manage to do more of what you like the most. So it's not that I'm trying to be positive, but
you're trying.
But I love my job.
I do you like what you do as well. Like even like doing it, like for me, doing networking, I dislike all of it, but like it's a necessity to do the job. So like my grandfather used to say when I was younger, like if you don't do what you love what you do. It's just like you turn the sentence around and you just try to change your perspective on liking new things, even if you don't like
A nice
it.
poster.
Yes, I should add this coat under you.
A good grandfather. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're gonna switch gear a bit.
There's a question.
Oh yeah.
It's not so much a personal quality, but I heard it a lot in all of your profiles is that you had to move around. You went to Glasgow, you guys are in the USA, you came from Italy, so you had to move around. And I think that's, without getting too personal, I think that's one of the things that stresses me out the most about research is uprooting your life and just going somewhere else. And do you think that, I don't know what the question is here, but it is, I think, an important part of research. And what do you think that adds to who you are as a researcher, I would say? Those of you who moved around.
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Far away from my country. And it's difficult. It's difficult. It's part of the passion that you have, that you feel like I'm doing something that I really like, that makes me improve. It gives you opportunity. And I really improved in all my experience around. Sometimes it's hard, but I think that every choice in life, there is something that is hard and something that is good. I mean, there is no pain, no gain. That's a little bit true. And I think that when you get older, it becomes even more difficult because sometimes you have family and husband that can be a neurologist and just try to get in your plan all the time. But it's nothing personal. But I mean, if you know where you want to get, you get there. And I think that it's like to be expert in a methodologies or just to try how to get before to think about your objective. I mean, your objective is to learn something in the best way possible. And if travel is the tool that helps you to get there, you're happy to use that tool. If you think about the tool alone, maybe it's not a good idea. It's like, oh, travel, I don't like that. But it's like, oh, if I go there for 1 year, I'm gonna learn that and I'm gonna be good at what I do. Travel is something that is part of your training, and so it's not so scary. That's my opinion.
Just quickly, it's super difficult to travel, especially when you're in a relationship with someone else and this person doesn't travel. So in my case, it was a combination of the worst time of my life and the best time of my life also, because it also gives you opportunities to know yourself in situations that you've never been in before, and you discover you have certain skills and certain traits that you didn't suspect. So so it's very difficult, but very, very rewarding.
That's so true.
Yeah, I would say that it's actually an advantage of the field. For me, I'm someone who loves to travel, so I think it was you can kind of see it for other people as an opportunity, either for a postdoc or for work, or even just for conferences or internships, or I think it can be something that is really an advantage. It comes, of course, with a lot of sacrifices as well, but I think it's for a research career, to be honest, I think at some point, I think it's essential to be kind of exposed to another way of functioning in a different lab, or it doesn't have to be too far, but to kind of change at least cities. It's just really eye-opening, I would say, for the career part of it. So I think you have to see it that way.
One thing that you might not know is that if you want to get funded by the federal agency, for instance, you're actually not allowed to do both your PhD and your postdoc outside of Canada. No. So you need to pick either your postdoc or your PhD. So this is something to bear in mind.
Oh, can I say something?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to say from the beginning. Now, I hear a lot of students, they are like, oh, now with the pandemic, we can do a postdoc in another city, but I actually stay here and I'm not moving because we can do that. And so don't do that. Really, the lab experience is the biggest and probably the most interesting part of doing research. And don't get settled with this idea that everything can be done in a room, in your place, and with a screen and a computer, because you will never have the same quality, the same intellectual stimulation, the same curiosity, the same criticism. That is a good thing because something that it makes you improve. So don't do that if you can. I mean, every case is different, but I would recommend that.
If I may add, not only if you want to work abroad, don't do that, but even here, don't do that. Come back.
Come
back in the labs. There's nobody in the department.
I miss you guys.
But you don't know what you're missing.
I agree with you, Simona, because a postdoc is these are fantastic years. You know, it's like you're doing the work like you're a PI without all the responsibilities. So it's a lot of fun. It's fantastic research experience. And it's also nice personal experience. You can travel, you can meet a lot of people, create a new network. So it's worth it. So it's so go, but come back. Yeah. So I would switch gear a bit. So we have been talking about financial about salaries and about uncertainty or stability. So maybe a lot of you might should be asking themselves, what about these salaries? So how much is what is the salary of a professor at the university? What is the salary in the industry, which can vary, I guess. So what are the salaries in your field or in your professions? So who want to start?
I think we should start with Grace. Everything.
Yeah, we'll start there and then we'll gradually go there.
There are wildly varying salaries in the tech industry. It definitely depends where you are and what your skill set is. I'd say the more broad skill set you have, like the more methods you can do, the more types of research questions you could possibly answer, the higher your salary is going to go. If you have academic training, you're definitely going to get paid more. Anyone with a PhD, there's usually an your entry level salary will be in US dollars, like around 120,000 a year. And then it will go up from there. I don't know what the translation into Canadian dollars is. I apologize. Yeah. And then the other thing that's interesting about how compensation is done in the tech industry is that it's also usually a combination of salary and equity in the company. So they'll pay you also a signing bonus, and then you'll get, some amount of money in Facebook stock or Google stock or whatever that as long as you stay there long enough, eventually it'll be yours. So they're kind of complicated compensation also.
What about the perks?
The perks? The perks is that you get paid a lot.
In addition to that, the food, the coffee.
Yeah, so we have stocked kitchens, so you can come get snacks anytime. And Most of the companies do breakfast and lunch. Some also do dinner, which is a trap. They're really just trying to get you to stay later and work longer. So don't fall for that trap. There's all sorts of kinds of weird things that some of the really big ones are doing. Like they'll do your laundry. There's shuttles. They'll fill your car with gas. Like they're trying to basically make it so that you don't have to have any other stuff to do. You can just focus on work. So you could learn never really to be a functioning adult if you wanted to, if you stayed in one of these jobs.
I don't know if it's the case at Netflix, but at Apple, I know that they will freeze your eggs if
oh, yes.
so that you can not make children until you're...
We have that too. Yep. Yeah. And that one's pretty incredible. They also have very good health packages, like all your medical and dental's covered. There's a life insurance policy you get, all that kind of thing too.
So just one follow-up. So you mentioned the entry-level salary for let's say a PhD person, but what's the range? Obviously, it varies in terms of depending on your experience, your skill set, but
yeah, so
an idea.
It depends on which career path you go down. So at some point, you will make a decision to either stay a researcher and continue to do research or go into management. And if you go up the chain of management, director, vice president, you could make $500,000 at some point. If you stay on the researcher track, most companies don't have people who've been around long enough to have an established set of like good ideas of how high it could go. I think at this point, you're usually probably highest paid people who've been in the tech industry for a long time are probably around $300,000 US. But then it's a new job. Like there aren't people who have come from academia with PhDs who have been in this career for a long time. So it's changing. They might end up making it more like the management path as time goes on.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Grace, I had a question for you, if I may, because I know you work in the Bay Area, I assume, and it comes with a lot of opportunities in tech and a lot of also different conditions of life, right? It's so expensive to live here. So
yeah,
do you think these numbers and these advantages that you're mentioning are the same in other cities as well, or is it kind of specific to the Bay Area?
It's definitely the Bay Area. New York is the same way. And then there's a couple like tier 2 cities that are beyond those two big ones in the US at least. So if you think of cities more sized like Austin, Denver, Chicago, Washington, DC, Seattle, Los Angeles, they tend not to have quite as big tech scenes. So they're very close behind. But a lot of companies are changing things now. Like just in the last 2 years, a ton of companies have said, you actually can work anywhere you want to. And they're making that now the competitive angle to get you to stay and work for them and get to live in Hawaii if you want to.
I will go next to stay in the industry. So like the salary as an entrepreneur, as you can imagine, when you start a company from scratch, it's probably $0. But at some point when you grow your business and you like you're paid with, she was talking about the equity, you're paid directly with shares. We have also stock option plan for employees that get their shares later if they stay in the company. But when you are a founder, you actually get this part that you need to grow in terms of value. So like at the beginning of the project, it was a few like on a cents, maybe less. But now it's like in terms of only my shares, it's maybe over $1 million in terms of value. But like you need to get the salary. Like I was 12 months with actually no money, and I was just paying with my credit cards and other things to actually live and pay my apartment. But now, like there is a very interesting program if you're interested to start your company after your PhD or even when you're doing a postdoc, called in MITAC. It's a MITAC that it's a Accelerate Entrepreneur. So it's actually like your company pay half your salary, and they will double it or even like triple it in some case, which is very great for you and your business. And so right now my salary is around 45 in grant a year, but with no taxes, which is actually for living in Montreal, all right, is higher than the average. So
thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks. I think you prepared something about the
but maybe the postdoc.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. So Laurent or Maxime?
Yeah, so postdocs, I think it depends on the country and university, but in my case, there's a minimum salary for postdocs that's established for all the university. And so that varies for first year versus second year versus third year, but I think, and also it changes every year, it's updated. So I think right now the first year is 53 or 54 thousand US dollars. So in my case, since I had external funding, my PI pays the difference basically, because the external funding from Quebec, once converted in US dollars, is less than 53. So yeah. And also there's health insurance. So in the US, it's pretty expensive. And here you have to have health insurance. And in my case, my PI pays it. Yeah.
And what about you, Maxime? Do you have the same experience?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. It's a national scale. So for the US, that's how it works. I would say though that, for example, San Francisco is really like UCSF is a big university, but they don't compensate for the fact that, you know, San Francisco is the most expensive city in the country. So you got to be careful when you pick your place. You know, for sure it's nice to live in a big city, but you would make the same salary in a much smaller, like US city. So for me, I don't regret my choice, but it's still to be considered, right? You would make the same salary living. Right now I pay, maybe my apartment is probably $2,000 something per month, and it's like the size of a hotel room. So you have to consider that in the equation. But the same as Laurent in terms of salary.
Yeah. Indeed, I considered this also before, and I think Yale, if you want to apply to a different university, Yale is pretty good because the city is not too expensive compared to Boston, New York, or even Princeton, or of course the Bay Area. So yeah.
I hope you're close to the beach, Maxime.
Yeah, but it's too cold to swim, so
Oh, yeah.
it's amazing. Living here is amazing. I'm living my best life here, so I'm not complaining. I'm just giving information to everyone.
So maybe we're do you want to talk about the salaries?
Yeah, maybe you could start with the last slide, just for fun. Yeah. Okay. So so in the industry in Montreal, basically what you can do as a researcher is be a data scientist. A data scientist in Canadian dollars, not American dollars, in the Montreal area makes on average slightly less than $83,000 per year. So, and that's exactly the amount. I was surprised at how accurate it was. It's exactly the amount, 83,000, that Xavier Morin-Duchesne, I mentioned earlier, was offered yesterday for his job. So I think this is pretty accurate.
Just because when we create job offer, we just go on the net, say what is the average, and we
so that's a pretty good site if you don't know it. Glassdoor, to have an idea of how much people are paid in different areas. So if instead of Montreal, I had put San Francisco, for instance, the salary would have been much higher than that. You can try if you want. But this is actually something you need to consider when you're thinking about salaries. You need to consider how much it costs living in different cities, Like Maxime mentioned, and Grace too, San Francisco is extremely expensive. So I'm not sure 120 US is actually more in terms of buying power than 83 Canadian, 83,000 Canadian. But definitely tops way before it does in the US here. So you see that the maximum on this website that was ever inputted was 112 for a senior data scientist. Okay, so maybe you can go back to the first salary slide I wanted to present. So what about university professors? Eventually we'll know. Okay, so this is a slide I made from an article that appeared in the Maclean's magazine in 2018. So these numbers are slightly outdated, but not by much. So you have in order from the cheapest universities to the ones that are more generous at the bottom, and a few are missing. So probably the most generous of them all is University of Toronto, and it's not in there. So I should have mentioned these are only Canadian universities, and I've eliminated the smaller ones. So the ones I left were either Quebec universities or the main Canadian universities. And you see that University of Montreal is in yellow, it's highlighted in yellow, it's in the middle. But essentially for an assistant professor, so this is what we call here Professeur adjoint, which has nothing to do with adjoint professor, just complicate things a little bit. So you see that on average, in 2018 in Canada, an assistant professor made 101. So that's after a PhD, and today, a few years of postdoc, typically something like 4. And when you get a promotion, you become an associate professor, Professeur agrégé. So here at University of Montreal, it comes l'agrégation with tenure. So it's not always the case. There is some dissociation between the two in some universities, but here it's the case. So as soon as you become an associate professor, you're tenured, and basically you have a permanent position, and you need to be, well, you need to do bad things to lose your job, essentially. And the average salary in Canada for an associate professor is 125, almost 126. For a full professor, Professeur titulaire, it's 155. So it's less than that here at the University of Montreal, but you know that the city of Montreal is a lot cheaper to live in than Toronto, which is cheaper than Vancouver. And you have all these British Columbia and Ontario universities in the list. So just to give you a better sense of what it means for University of Montreal, in the next slide, I show you how it works here. So it's not like that in all universities, but here we have a union, which has a lot of positive, but it comes with negative aspects also. But the fact that we're unionized means that everything is regularized. So when you enter, they just count the number of years that you've been a postdoc, and that gives you a starting echelon. I don't know what it is in English, but in any case, a starting salary. So you enter, then you have 4 years of postdoc, then you start here at 80.
For those who are in clinic, they also count the amount of clinical experience you have. So if you did for your postdoc, and then you have, I don't know, you calculate all the hours you have made in clinic, and then you have additional hours. So you can start maybe at year 7 or 8. So it's a positive thing.
So you enter at this grade, and then every year you climb up one step. Or here it's actually climb down. So you go from here to here if you have 4 years of postdoc. And eventually, after 5 or 6 years, you ask for a promotion, and then you become an associate professor, Professeur agrégé. And then you jump scale. So you pass from here to here because the promotion is the following year. So you get up one step and you jump scale. And at the very end of your career, or if you began really early on, like I did, you reach the maximum salary, which is, this was actually in 2019, so it's a bit higher now, which is close to 150. So that's how it works here. There are ways to get a little more than this. For instance, instead of being at University of Montreal, you could be a professor at Polytechnique. Then the scales are a bit different. It's a bit higher. Another thing you can do to get a little more is have a company on the side, like I do.
Or do clinic.
Do clinic, or have a Canada research share, and then you get a bonus. And there are bonuses for everybody else, but they're actually quite difficult to get nowadays. Next slide. So just one more slide, because it's not only in academia, in Quebec at least, that you can do research. You can also do research as a cégep professor. And you can become a cégep professor, in theory, only with a bachelor degree in psychology. In practice, you don't find many cégep professors that don't have a master degree or a PhD. But it's definitely something you could become. And the way it works in cégep, it's a bit more. So this is actually for the cégep that are part of one of the unions that represent cégeps in Quebec. So if you have a PhD, then you begin at 8 here. So this is your starting salary, and you can go up to there. So you start at essentially 57, and you end up at 91,000 per year. At least that was the case in 2019. But that gives you an idea of how much of the range of salaries in cégep. In cégep, you don't have all the jobs that I mentioned earlier. You only have teaching. You can do some managing, but you don't have to. And if you want to do some research, you can. You're eligible to research grants, just like we are. It's a bit more difficult to get students, so you need to often have a collaboration with someone in the university, but it's possible to apply and to get grants, research grants.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, so we don't have much time left, so just maybe to conclude, would you have, in few words, each of you, something to, an advice or a turning point in your career that made you take that path, or would you have just few words to conclude and advice to the student and future researchers who are here? Grace, do you want to start?
Sure. The first thing I'll say is just there's no wrong decision. As long as you get to do research, you'll find a happy path in academia or in the industry. There's no, one's not better than the other. They just have different perks. And I think the thing that helped me the most was the thing I hated doing the most, which is networking and having the right access to the right people to guide me that this was even a career, because I didn't know it was a thing until right before I jumped into it.
Thanks.
Great. So I will follow. Yes. So thank you everyone for listening to me. But also I would say that maybe the same thing as there is no wrong choice. And if you have like a dream or a vision, or you want to be like create your own business or startups or something like that, or even work in the industry to do the research, because the advantage of creating a startup or a company based on your research you've done, it's like it will not just stay on a database. It will actually serve the population and do something with it. So I would say that if you have some questions about how to apply to grants or to automate and use web scrapper for to do the networking for you, this is what I do now. I don't do it at end. So like, do not hesitate. It will be a pleasure to help you.
Thanks. Maxime?
Yeah, I don't have one specific. I think just maybe for personal experience, I think first of all, like don't stress too much about like the next steps. I think sometimes it's good to plan ahead, but sometimes everything just falls together as well. There's always like different opportunities at every step. So don't worry too much about it. Also, maybe another advice that was really useful for me is, you know, to choose your supervisors really well. And this is also a compliment to Simona, who really kind of was such a great mentor for me and still is today, and other people as well. And it makes such a difference, at least for me. So that's another advice that I have.
Thanks. Laurent?
Yeah, I think sometimes academic career can be hard, especially at the level of the postdoc. I found since then the next step is the biggest jump basically in your career, trying to find a faculty position, and it's really hard. But I think you have to understand that there are, as we discussed, different profiles, and you just have to persevere and do the best that you can, and something will come. And also in regard to the fact that we have to move in different countries and everything, it can be scary when you've never done it. So what I've done myself, and I think it's a good idea to do a shorter research stays during your graduate studies, like go a few months and abroad, collaborate with someone. Also, it can be really nice opportunities to meet people. And so, yeah, that would be my more practical advice. Yeah.
Thank you. Simona?
Just find your passion and reshape it. It's normal to reshape it through your training, through your experience, through your life. And ask other people. Other people, they are always happy to talk about themselves. Don't use it. And just try to be yet and remember that there is not one straight line to go from place A to B. There are many possible lines. You have one in mind, but you can just think about other possibilities to get where you want to get. So don't be discouraged if the first one is not the right one for you. Yeah.
I don't really have much to add, but I agree with what all of my colleagues said, and the famous words of our Prime Minister.
Can I say just one thing? That we don't have free food as academic people, but I think we can have some wine or something to drink once a week.
My conclusive word. So I think it's thank you very, very much to all of you for taking that time to share and to take part of that discussion. I found it super interesting and inspiring. I think that there are differences between our environment of research, but also there are a lot of common things. And I think that passion, opportunities are things that we have to keep in mind in building a career in research. So thank you very, very much to all of you. And hopefully we'll see each other again in other opportunities. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.